The time is now 3:30 p.m. We're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. If you would all please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. We will now move into roll call. Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Yes. Councilmember Sandoval.
Here.
Councilmember Salazar.
Here.
Chair Barajas.
Here. All right, we have a quorum. We will now go into public comments not on items not on today's agenda. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to comment at this time? Anyone online? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment, general public comment. Clerk, can you please run us through the Levine Act disclosure?
Does anyone have any Levine Act contributions to disclose? Councilmember Sandoval.
No.
Councilmember Salazar.
No.
Chair Barajas.
No. Thank you. We will now move into our consent agenda. ID number 25-463, minutes from September 30th, 2025, Housing and Land Use Committee meeting. Are there any questions? Anybody? No? We'll go ahead and take it out for a public comment. Is there any member of the public that wishes to comment on today's consent agenda? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close public comment on this item. Seeking a motion on this.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Sandoval, second by Councilmember Salazar. Can you please call for a roll?
Councilmember Sandoval.
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar.
Aye.
Chair Barajas.
Aye. Thank you. Motion passes. We will now move into our consideration agenda. Today's items are a little bit in a different order. We're going to start with ID number 25-446, substantial amendments to HUD fiscal years 23-24, 24-25, and 25-26 annual action plans. And we have Mr. Francisco Brambilla, Management Analyst with the Community Development Department's Housing Division.
Good afternoon, committee members and members of the public. My name is Francisco Brambilla. I'm the Management Analyst for the Housing Division. Today's presentation outlines the proposed substantial amendments to the city's HUD annual action plans for fiscal year 2023-24, 24-25, and 25-26. The amendments addresses the reallocation of unspent CDBG and home funds to ensure timely expenditure and HUD compliance. These adjustments are essential to maintain our standing as a HUD entitlement jurisdiction and to continue receiving annual funding. Community Development Block Grant, CDBG. HUD requires that CDBG entitlement jurisdictions to maintain a line of credit balance that is not greater than 1.5 times the annual grant amount, 60 days before the end of the program year. Due to delays in projects, the COVID-19 pandemic, and changes in staff, the city has been out of compliance with this timeline standard for 4 consecutive years and is actively implementing an expenditure plan approved by HUD. However, the decision to not award the Sherwood Recreation Center in September 2025 disrupted the HUD-approved workout plan that the city had been implementing. As a result, the funds allocated to this project will not be spent on a timely manner. Staff therefore identified the need to reallocate funds to shovel-ready projects that can be completed within the current fiscal year. The proposed amendment for CDBG, the Chinatown Neighborhood Improvements Project currently in design will not spend its full allocation by April 2026. Construction is planned for fiscal year 2026-27. To stay timely, the city proposes to reallocate $1,060,000 from that project to ready to implement public improvement efforts in rehabilitation and affordable housing development. Funds will be redirected to 2 projects. The Allenstown neighborhood sidewalk improvements, which includes installing the streetlights along the areas bounded by Kern Street, Norma Data, East Alisal, and East Market, and installing ADA sidewalk curb ramps along St. Edwards Avenue, Oregon Street, Todd Street, Machado Way, Kimmel Street, and other streets in the neighborhood. This project would increase from $330,000 to $950,000. Now, the second project will be the rehabilitation of affordable housing. In this case, $440,000 would be used to the rehabilitation of Vista La Terraza and its activity delivery. Chinatown construction funds will be restored with CDBG funds in fiscal year 26-27 once it enters the construction phase. Additionally, funding can come from the capital improvement project already established for the Chinatown Improvements Project, which it currently holds about $1 million. The Home Investment Partnership Program, or HOME, a Notice of Funding Availability, or NOFA, was issued in June 24, 2025. It identified several affordable housing projects ready to use home funds. The city identified $2.48 million previously allocated to the Republic Cafe housing project, which remains unspent. Combined with $1.95 million in uncommitted home funds, this would total $4.43 million available for affordable housing, rental housing developments. The proposed amendment is to reallocate $2.4 million from the Republic Cafe project and $1.1 million from the uncommitted projects from fiscal year 24-25 to the NOFA Home Affordable Housing Project, which will include activities from projects identified through the NOFA process, supporting both new construction and rehabilitation. This project includes two projects from Chispa, which is the rehabilitation of Vista La Terraza, and the construction of St. George Apartments. Additionally, home funds will be used to support the construction of 200 Casantini apartments by Milestone Housing. Now, the Republic Cafe is currently in pre-development phase, funded through a grant from the Regional Early Action Planning Program. This will be part of a larger development in Chinatown, involving 34, 36, 38, 37, 39, 40, and 45 Soledad Street. I would like to mention that even though we're proposing to remove home funds from the Republic Cafe, funding will be restored through future funding allocations from other funding opportunities once the project is closer to construction. More details about the projects will be discussed by my colleague Stephen in the family application award recommendation item after this presentation. Now, for the Citizens Participation Plan, this substantial amendment process requires a 30-day public review and comments and notice of public hearing. This period runs from October 18 to November 18, the date of the public hearing at its City Council meeting. Notices were published in English and Spanish at the Monterey Herald and posted at the city's website, City Hall, libraries, Community Development Department, and they were also emailed to the Housing Division distribution list. The draft substantial amendment is available for the public review online, in person, at the libraries, City Hall, and Community Development Department. It can also be requested via email. It was also emailed to the members of the Housing Distribution list. Public feedback will be incorporated into the final version before submission to HUD. Now, our recommended motion is that the Housing and Land Use Committee is asked to recommend that City Council approve a submission of the substantial amendment to HUD for fiscal year 2023 through 2026 annual action plans, authorize the reallocation of $5.49 million in unspent home and CDBG funds to eligible projects, and also authorize the city manager and designee to make a final modifications based on community feedback and execute related HUD documents. This amendment strengthens our compliance with HUD timeliness standards and advance key housing and infrastructure goals. They will allow us to invest federal funds into projects that are ready to deliver community benefit now. And with this, I conclude my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions from the committee.
Thank you for the presentation. I'll bring it to the body if there are any questions. Councilmember Sandoval?
Sure. Can you tell me, I see your 1.94 of uncommitted funds. What fund, or where's that uncommitted funds coming from?
Is from home funding. So when we went to through our action plan process, I think it was in 2024, 25, 25, 26, we didn't identify a project at the time. So what we did was that we put language into the action plan that once a project had been identified, we would come back and actually do a substantial amendment and allocate those funds to that particular project. And that's what we're doing with this process.
Okay, on the proposed amendment slide where it talks, shows the Chinatown neighborhood improvements, available amount 1.1 million, recommended 50,000, and then Alisal neighborhood revitalization 330,000. So, what kind of impact is that going to have to the Chinatown neighborhood improvements?
At this moment, nothing, because there's funding allocated right now for the design phase of the project. Now, once that design phase is completed, obviously we're going to go for bids for the actual construction of the project, and then we are estimated that by that time it's going to be probably like the beginning of the fiscal year. So by that time, we're also going to be able to allocate funds from our CDBG from our fiscal year 26-27 action plan.
Okay, and then we talked about Sherwood Hall and, shifting that money towards shovel-ready projects.
Mhm.
So what's the plan to make sure we fill that funding gap for Sherwood Hall?
For Sherwood, we're not removing any funding. So the funding that we had allocated for Sherwood Recreation Center, it's already there. We're not removing it. What happened was that when we came to City Council, in order for us for Public Works to accept the general contractor contract, since it was rejected, then our timeline changed for expenditures. So at that time, what we needed to do is actually find some other funds that we can actually utilize in order for us to move them and actually spend those funds within this fiscal year and actually meet our timeliness test.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you the first time then. Yeah,
Yeah.
my apologies. Okay, those are all my questions for now. Thank you.
Councilmember Salazar, questions?
Yeah, just out of curiosity, I saw that there was that cumulative 5.4, I'm going to round up to 5.5 million. By any chance, you have a breakdown by fiscal year for that total amount? I'm just curious if there was one particular fiscal year.
For which one? Which?
The 5.4, 5.5.
Oh, yeah. That
From
is
home
coming
CDBG?
from the ones for CDBG is coming from fiscal year. Actually, we're using the funding from this 25-26 annual action plan fiscal year. The ones for home, that is coming from 3 years. That is coming from the 2023-24, 24-25, and 25-26.
So home was 3 years, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, I'll just have some few clarification questions. Are our HUD annual action plan submitted are we like on a cyclical basis, kind of like RENA? Because
No.
we're revising plans for the last 3 actual.
Yes. No, it's not tied to the arena because CDBG and home funding can actually be used for different activities. Not necessarily to create housing. Obviously, arena is for us to create housing, right? That's our goal, for us to create the housing. But home funding can be used to create housing, new housing, or to rehabilitate housing too. And our action plan period is a fiscal year period. So it starts in July 1st and ends in June of the following year. And arena is on a calendar year. It's based on a calendar year. Now, this funding that we're trying to reallocate, the home funding, that's going to help us with, hopefully it's going to help us with our arena numbers once the projects are completed, which is going to take maybe 2 to 3 years or so for us to complete some of those projects.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Similar to what Councilmember Sandoval brought up in terms of Chinatown neighborhood improvements, only this, I don't know if this question is more appropriate in this item or the subsequent item, because they're kind of tied to each other.
Mhm.
But Are the work plans for the Chinatown neighborhood improvements different from the Republic Cafe rehabilitation and civilization?
Yes. The scope of work that we have for the Chinatown neighborhood improvements is more of doing streetlights in the neighborhood, also and rehabilitating some of the streets, and also do 88 ramps at some of the intersections too. And the Republic Cafe is going to be the actual development. That's going, like I said, that's going to be part of a bigger development with the other city-owned properties there. So we're trying to package everything into one development. And that is, at least for the Republic Cafe, is going to include the museum that we're planning to have with ACE, and also the housing on the second floor.
You answered my subsequent question, which was,
Okay.
is there a housing component to the Republic Cafe?
Yes,
Which-
which is that plus the other lots that the city owns. So that's also going to be kind of, like I said, it's going to be a part of a bigger development.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for that clarification.
Okay.
Any more questions? All right, we'll go ahead and take it out for a public comment on this item. Is there anyone from the public that wishes to comment on this item?
Hey, good afternoon, commissioners, housing team, Salinas. Yeah, this is, this feels like something to be excited about, genuinely. We know that amongst our base, that need for that housing, that development to take shape, this obviously indicates a move in that direction. And I know we've expressed this before, but any way that we can support that messaging, moving that forward, and further engagement, just to know that, just so that our residents can understand timeline and capacity, as well as levels of affordability. Okay, so thank you very much.
All right. We'll go ahead and take it out to online public comment. Phone number ending in 4436. Phone number ending in 4436. You can begin your public comment. Trying one more time, phone number ending in 4436. All right, seeing that it appears we're having some technical difficulties there, we'll go ahead and just try it one last time. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and close public comment on this item. Phone number ending in 4436. Please try making your public comment now. I don't think we're able to hear them. We will go ahead and close public comment on this item due to technical difficulties with folks participating remotely. We'll bring it back to the body for any comments and action. Comments? That being said, can we pull up the slide with the requested motion? I'll go ahead and entertain this motion.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Salazar, the motion on the screen as is, seconded by Councilmember Sandoval. Clerk, can you please call for the roll?
Councilmember Sandoval. Aye. Councilmember Salazar.
Yes.
Chair Barajas.
Aye. Motion passes. We will now move into ID number 25-445, fiscal year 25-26, multifamily housing application award recommendations. And we have Stephen Acker, Senior Community Development Analyst.
Okay, good afternoon, committee members and members of the public. I am Stephen Acker, Senior Community Development Analyst for the Community Development Department Housing Division. I will be covering the city's multifamily notice of funding availability process and our award recommendations. This presentation will also serve as a public hearing requirement for any projects, the projects funded with local housing trust fund. And then I'll also just kind of want to emphasize that we haven't done a notice of funding availability for a few years for multifamily development within the city. So it's a pretty exciting update to bring to you all. And yeah, we're excited to address this to the public and to this body here. Okay. So the city's NOFA, which is a Notice of Funding Availability for Multifamily Development, allows local housing developers to bid for federal, state, and local funds to create affordable housing in the city of Salinas. The 2025 NOFA includes funding sources from multiple state and federal sources that you can see there. The total amount of recommended funding from this NOFA was $8,460,220. And the primary purpose, or the underlying purpose here with these funds was to find projects where we could deploy the funds to provide affordable housing units in a quick manner. The goal is to really find the projects that we can work with the developers to get as many affordable housing units out into the city as quickly as possible. Okay. So here is a slide that explains the NOFA application and award and the timelines that we employed in city staff. The NOFA publication and release date was done on June 24, 2025. Staff, we held a workshop for applicants as well to answer questions and guide the applicants through the application process. After a thorough review process with several city staff from many divisions, and after meeting with each developer upon their development application, staff compiled funding recommendations that will be presented here. We will go over those. And after it's brought here, we will take to City Council for a final recommendation. It is important to note here that a key priority for the city is to meet expenditure deadlines that my colleague Francisco also had mentioned, and ensure that the recommendations are ready for City Council, that when we bring the funding recommendations to City Council on November 18. These are our amounts requested and the applications that we received. Without going into, a lot of detail within each application, I'd like to point out the totals. So on the bottom there, you see there's a total of $17,981,000 was requested through the NOFA of only 8.4 approximately million available. And in a perfect world, that if we had each of those, or the gap findings for each of those, that would have produced 308 affordable units. So that's explained in the totals at the bottom there. We received development applications for projects, for new construction projects, for rehabilitation and renovation projects, as well as for acquisition projects. And I'll go into more detailed description of each of the applications received now. Okay. So the first application that we reviewed is the Vista de la Terraza project. This project is a rehabilitation and renovation project of an existing multifamily apartment building that would include substantial work to the siding of the building, landscaping, windows, wall retention, and various other aspects to improve this building. There are already existing tenants in the building, and the work being done to improve this this project would enhance the facilities for current residents. So the target population here is current families of VDLT, is Vista de la Terraza project. The next project is the Casentini Street Family Apartments. The developer is Milestone Housing Group and HDC. The scope of work is, this is a new construction project, so entirely newly built units from the ground up. It would involve 87 affordable housing units, one manager unit, and the population would be families. The third one that we looked at is St. George Apartments. This is also new construction of 35 affordable housing units with one manager unit. The target population here would be senior housing. And I'll just pause to say here that the images that you see, these are renderings, architectural renderings and plans that may not entirely be exactly as the form of when the project is built, but it gives the committee here and the members of the public an idea of what the outside facade of the project may look like in the future. The fourth project that the city reviewed was the East Laurel Phase 1 project. This is also a new construction of affordable multifamily units. This project is interesting in that it specifically is for workforce housing, primarily farm worker housing that would house farm workers and those working in the agricultural industry in the city of Salinas. Again, the images are renderings, architectural renderings of what the project would look like. Okay. The final project that city staff looked at is the Salinas Modular Project. It was, the developer is RHCB Development, and this is modular. It was proposed to do modular housing that would provide 66 affordable units in one manager unit, with the target population being City of Salinas residents, and 7 of those units being set aside for permanent supportive housing. Okay. So the next slide, this refers back to what my colleague Francisco was mentioning about development or a city project known as the Republic Cafe. This is why the agency says City of Salinas, as in this is a city project. This project was not part of the NOFA process. However, we recently received a cost estimate to stabilize the facade and the roof of a city project, which is this. And part of the funding recommendation that you will find today is that we recommend to set aside some of our funding to fund the stabilization of this site. And upon the final construction of the site, of course, again, those images are very, very early renderings. But once that project is fully constructed, staff anticipate up to 6 affordable housing units to be provided there. We do not have a target population, so that is still to be determined for that. Okay, so this is our city staff's recommended funding for the NOFA. I'll go ahead and walk us through the recommended funding. At the top is the Vista de la Terraza project. The applicant is Chispa. That was the first one that we saw at 165 to 177 Carr. The amount requested actually for the project was $607,000. After staff met with the developer and discussed the project in detail, we determined there was actually a part of the scope of work that could be funded through CDBG funding that we could set aside for this project, and that is recommended, that's shown there in the recommended number. So it's at the top there. Milestone Housing, the project at 200 Casentini Street, requested $7.25 million. After meeting with the applicant and determining what we could provide, staff recommends $3.837 million. A third application is the St. George Apartments. It's also from the developer Chispa Housing. This is a senior housing project. The request was $4 million, and staff recommended $2.372 million. For the East Laurel Phase 1 project and the RHCB Salinas Modular project, staff did meet with both developers to discuss the projects in depth about what was feasible with what we could provide recommended funding for, and determined that although we would continue to support the projects, that at this time, due to the need to prioritize the projects that would go through the entitlement process and allow us to meet our expenditure spend timeliness requirements, we determined that, and it was decided that those projects wouldn't need to get the recommended funding at this time right now. And then finally, the sixth project that you see at the bottom, which is the Republic Cafe project, which is a City of Salinas project. The $2 million is the amount requested, which is a estimate that city staff received to do fire remediation and stabilization of the site. We determined that $1.29,521 would be best utilized to fund that project. And then the final totals there, you'll see the amount requested kind of jumps up to $19.981 million. But due to this being gap financing that the city would provide to help move these projects along, we are now recommending, hey, in total, we will recommend to fund $8.46 or $8,460,220 to support 4 projects, and that is represented here. Okay. So I know that's a lot of information, and of course we are here to go into answer any questions necessary, but to wrap it up here is our recommended motion to provide a preliminary award of $8,460,220 of various fundings to those 4 projects: the Chispa Vista de la Terraza project for $960,000, Milestone Housing of new construction at 200 Casentini Street for $3,837,000, the Chispa new construction at 376 East Alvin Drive for $2,372,699, and the Republic Cafe Rehabilitation Project for $1,290,521. Of course, the second part of this motion would provide the city manager or their designee to negotiate and execute all applicable forms, conditional commitments, agreements, and related documents, grant-related documents, and subsequent amendments as needed. And finally, I would just end with kind of what I began in the beginning with, which is that that St. George project, the Milestone Housing project at 200 Casentini, and the Republic Cafe project, they will be receiving local housing trust fund funds, and this recommended motion would serve as a public hearing requirement needed to use those funds for that purpose. And with that being said, I'll go ahead and end this presentation, and we can answer any questions that the committee members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Acker, for the presentation. We'll open up to committee members for any questions. Councilmember Sandoval?
Sure. On the slide where Chispa was asking for, I think it was, $4 million, and we recommended 2.372. How do we make that determination?
Yeah, so for this project, we had already kind of given them some money for acquisition. The part that we are helping them with for this amount of funding, I think, is to help them get to the next phase for the St. George Apartments. I mean, for the more specific aspects of how this project moves across the board, I'll probably defer to my colleague Francisco about it. But it's my understanding that because there's various different federal funding sources, it's, some reductions of some helps with moving other projects along, and yeah, I'll let Francisco answer this one.
I mean, as you can see, that the amount that requested always exceed the amount of funds that is available. And one thing that we did, we also met with all the developers, and come out, and between them and us, we came up with the amount that they can actually utilize in order for them to actually go and apply for additional funding, or for all the rest of the capital that is going to be needed in order for them to build the housing. In this case, we are. At least for this particular project, we're plugging in home funding and also local housing trust fund and also PLHA, which is the state funding for those projects.
Thank you.
Councilmember Salazar, any questions?
Yeah, I have a few. During the presentation, there was a buzzword that caught my attention when we're talking about the rehabilitation of multifamily units, specifically regarding the Chispa. That I heard during the presentation talked about siding. So I'm just curious to know how old is these particular units? Do we know if siding repair is a part of that? And if, I'm just curious to know if that was as a result of like maybe cracking or warping or fading. I know that sometimes termites is often an issue.
This development is at least 30 years old. Okay. I mean, I think a few years back we also assisted them with doing preliminary rehabilitation on that particular project. We did helical anchors in order for them to stabilize all the units, because most of the development is actually on a hill. So a lot of those units were actually sliding into the hill. So this was about a few years back, And then obviously Chispa understood that there was and we also understood there was additional work that needed to happen in this development. So part of it is also going to be the siding. So now they're on this phase where they came to us and asked us for that funding in order for them to do the additional work that is going to be needed in this development.
And then also, in terms of the other projects that we would be supporting if this passes, did read about the units and the manager's units. Now, I'm pretty familiar with some of the projects that Chispa does. I know that quite often they have like these multi-purpose rooms and these community rooms. Are those eligible for this type of funding, or are those ineligible?
There, I mean, the funding that we're going to be allocating for each of the projects is a small portion of actually the whole capital that they're going to need for the project. So usually what happens with our funding, we, whenever we go into contract with them and we try to put restrictions on some of the units, we look at the whole entire funding that was actually used for the development, and we do a prorated amount based on the amount that the city put in. But it is eligible. Some of the funding is eligible to pay for that, but we usually try to focus on paying for the actual living units. They get additional funding from other funding sources in order for them to actually build those amenities that some of those developments are going to need.
Okay, so the priority being to the units that are being lived in.
Yes.
That's what I'm hearing.
Like my colleague said, that this funding is gap financing. So some of these projects are going to be worth, is $50 million, right? And we are only putting $2.3 million on them. So that, at least our funding is enough for them to actually go and search for additional funding, additional capital. So it's stating, okay, that the city is committing some of this funding for this project. So they're saying, okay, we have commitments from the city, so now let's go for state funding or other source of funding with this in mind, saying, okay, we have the commitment for this from the city.
Thank you.
All right. I'll start off with, in terms of this chart that we have displayed right now in recommended funding and the projects that are recommended for funding, will any of these projects be break ground within this next fiscal year?
Now the only ones that is ready to be constructed is Vista La Terraza. On that, we are planning to start construction probably the first quarter of the year. So that's the plan. Now, for the other, like I said, for the other projects, the developers, they still have to go and actually get the additional capital that is needed for the construction. That usually takes them from 2 to 3 years for them to actually get all their capital for the projects. So it's going to take at least 2 years for some of those projects to break ground.
Okay. And when the city issued the NOFA, was there anything disclosed in the NOFA that stated that, I mean, it was pretty clear in the staff report what metrics and rubrics were being used to qualify projects for funding. But was there ever anything disclosed that said that the city could opt to not consider all those things and opt to select an internal project, an internal capital project that did not apply for that funding?
We put language in there to that the recommendations are going to be under discretion for this on the city. Yeah.
At the discretion of the city using the criteria outlined in the NOFA. But
Yes.
the question is there anything in the NOFA that says the city may consider internal capital projects over NOFA applicants?
Not specifically, but there's the language in there does give us discretion as to who to fund.
Okay. Just have some concerns there in terms of fairness, right?
Yeah.
If I'm one of the project applicants and all of a sudden the city decides to fund $1.2 million for a project that's going to only provide 6 units of housing, and if the goal of this is housing, I don't really see where that kind of pencils out. I mean, Chispa at Vista de la Terraza, they requested $600,000, but they're getting $900,000, right? They didn't even ask for that extra amount, and we're just giving it to them. Whereas other folks like the Salinas Modular Project with 66 potential units, Eden Housing over at 855 East Laurel Phase 1 with 78 potential units, it just, although the rationale is outlined in the staff report, I can't wrap my head around the allocation for Republic Cafe when there's an over allocation for Vista de la Terraza and an allocation for a project that is not shovel ready, that is for remediation, that's not primarily for housing, and whose housing affordability is not determined at this time.
Yes, so that was the whole reason for us also meeting with the developers too. And we talked to them about the proposed amounts that we have recommended. And they, I mean, we didn't have any how do you say it, any negative for them to say about the process that we went through. Now, in the case for the Republic Cafe, the valuation of the actual property, when that funding that we have there is from the Local Housing Trust Fund. Now, when we apply for the Local Housing Trust Fund to the state, the valuation of the property was also part of the city's match. Now, with that, the city had to be committed in order to add additional local housing trust funds to the project. And that's the reason why you can see the $1.2 million in there for that.
Okay. And, I mean, it looks like we're kind of just playing a really complicated game of accounting, right? Of just making sure things pencil out and according to the projected timelines. Along those lines, is our expenditure ratio counted at the time of council approval, at the time that the funds are dispersed, or at the time that the project is completed?
At least for CDBG, which is the grant that has that requirement over expenditure timeliness, what it counts is the amount of funding that has been spent by the deadline, by 60 days prior to the end of the program year. So in this case, usually in May 2nd, I think is when HUD does their test, and by that time, that's when we need to make sure that we will have to meet that requirement. Now, for home funding and the other funding sources, there's also a limited time for us to spend. But in the case for home, once we enter into an agreement, the developer has 4 years for them to actually have spent those funds. And then for Local Housing Trust Fund, they have additional time for them to spend those funds.
Okay. Do we know what Chispa for the Vista de la Terraza project is going to do with the surplus 330?
Yes, we requested, we asked them to see if they were able to spend additional CDBG funds, and they came back with additional scope of work. Obviously, this doesn't encompass all the work that is needed, but they did add additional funds, which was to add additional siding, a lot of the landscaping that needs to happen, and I think they're also going to do some windows too on some of these units. So there's.
Okay, and for the projects at 855 East Laurel Phase 1 and the Salinas Modular Project, in conversations with them, did they ever express what they could do with $1.2 million had it been allocated to them? Like, do we know if, I mean, this looks like a pretty concrete funding allocation, right? Yeah. But if we were to try to move around the $1.2 million to one of the unfunded projects and or reallocate it amongst the projects that still have a funding gap from the funding amount requested, what project would move along further?
The A55 East Laurel Street, we decided not to fund them because they still have some funds that we actually invested in them. We gave them $500,000, and they haven't spent all those funds. So obviously, we want them to spend those funds first before we actually add additional funds to that project. But obviously, any funding that we give to them is going to help them with that gap financing piece that they need to.
So are any other of the recommended project fundees, I'm missing my words here, have any of the other ones also received city funding so far that they haven't fully expended?
No. Casentini hasn't received anything. Chispa is the one that received funding, but this was years back. I think it was 5 or 6 years ago. But the other one that has received is the St. George Apartments. We gave them $670,000 from PLHA for them to acquire the property from the St. George Episcopal Church.
Okay.
And obviously that has been spent, and they're on track on that. Now, for the project at 300 Monterey Street, their proposal was they wanted $2 million to purchase a city lot. So with that, what we have done with prior projects that are actually, that are on city-owned properties, what we have done is work with the developers to either donate the property or sell it to them at a lower cost, you know. In this case, we decided not to fund it at this moment because there hasn't been much conversations with the city about that particular lot. Now, we did mention to them about the projects that we're proposing on Soledad Street, on Chinatown Street, and they were really interested in actually being some of the developers that are going to apply for that are going to submit a proposal for those projects.
Okay. Is the $500,000 that was allocated for Eden Housing for the 855 East Laurel project, what work stream per se was that for? I'm assuming that the funding allocation was for a different set of work to be completed.
Yes, that was for pre-development work. So for them to do the plans, you know, do all the design all the infrastructure that was going to happen. So they're still working on that. So. And
what would the funds at this? What would this funding allocation be for if it's not for pre-development?
What they, the amount that they requested was going to be for construction. But then they came back and asked us to see if we can move those, if they can change their scope of work. They wanted those funds for, I think, for additional pre-development costs.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. That's all my questions. We'll take it out for public comment on this item. Is there any member of the public that wishes to comment on this item?
Luis Chago Juarez, again, for Building Healthy Communities. And yeah, I'm super excited about this. Only to just kind of, again, just, you've heard the message before and how much of the need is for, you know, development, to see the development take place and shape. I know that in speaking with one of our resident leaders here, she's already, you know, asking for applications already, you know, and so I know we're not there yet, but really, like, it's, and obviously there's things to work out still, but again, this feels as if that there's something there to keep working towards, and again, like, we will do whatever we can to help support that. Yeah, thank you very much.
Buenas tardes, mi nombre es Verónica Torres. Quería preguntarle sobre si va a haber aplicaciones para Chispa o Housing.
She was asking a question if there are going to be any applications for the Chispa housing, if we could just have someone just connect with her offline. ¿Sí? Alguien del personal se conectará con usted. Okay. And we'll go.
Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias. We'll go to online public comment. We'll start off with, again, phone number ending in 4436. We cannot hear you. Phone number ending in 4436. All right, let's come back to 4436. We'll go to Alec Manas. We cannot hear you, Mr. Manas. We still cannot hear. All right, we'll try 4436 one more time, and then Mr. Alec Manas one more time, and if not, we'll go ahead and close out public comment virtually. Again, phone number 4436, final attempt. All right, moving on to Mr. Alec Manas. Final attempt. All right, seeing that we are unable to get our folks participating virtually to make their public comment, we will go ahead and close out public comment on this item. We'll bring it back to the committee for final action and/or comments. And can we pull up the slide with the recommended motion as well, please? Do we have a motion?
Move approval?
All right. I'll go ahead and second that. Motion by Councilmember Sandoval, second Chair Barajas. Clerk, can you please call for the vote?
Councilmember Sandoval,
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar,
No.
Councilmember Barajas,
Aye. Motion passes. We will now move into ID number 25-447, Memorandum of Understanding between City of Salinas and the County of Monterey to administer and operate the Share Center. And we have Ms. Keishla Lopez, Homeless Services Manager, during the presentation.
Good afternoon, Housing and Land Use Committee and community members. My name is Keishla Lopez, and I am the Homeless Services Manager with the Housing and Community Development. Today, I will be doing a presentation on the revised 5-year MOU for the Share Center between the City of Salinas and the County of Monterey. Oh, here's my clicker. So we actually started on this presentation, the recommended motion first. So I will go back to this slide towards the end. But we have two requests or recommended motions for this, and it is to approve a new 5-year MOU with the County of Monterey. And the purpose of the revisions is to establish a further joint governance, funding, and operations of the Share Center. As mentioned in the staff report, we've actually had a couple, I'm sorry, my clicker's not working. Thank you, Luis, whatever you did. So, as mentioned in the staff report, we've had two revised MOUs for the Share Center. As we've been working through the operations of the Share Center jointly, we've identified areas where we need to better improve in our communication and processes. So this is the first MOU that is a long-page document. The former MOUs are like a collaborative document regarding the 855 East Laurel housing. So this MOU is specifically to the Share Center, and it will replace the old MOUs that were in place before. So as mentioned, it establishes the joint administration and the shared 50-50 operational cost responsibility. I'll give you an example. There was a question on whether rapid rehousing dollars is considered an operational expense. Through collaboration and negotiation with our partners, we identified rapid rehousing is absolutely essential in order to move people from emergency shelter into housing. So that is something we've incorporated into this MOU so that if I were no longer here and somebody else steps in, they know that the city is to ensure that we are supporting the rental assistance costs. It also gives a clear definition of the roles and responsibilities. So an example of that is that the City of Salinas is responsible for the requests for proposals. So I think it's every 3 years, we release a request for proposal for an operator of the Share Center. The City of Salinas holds that primary responsibility according to this MOU, and it is now clearly defined. And then the county being the sole owner of the actual property, they're more primarily responsible for the capital improvements. And then this MOU also explains what is a capital improvement versus a maintenance cost, because maintenance costs would be shared 50-50. Capital improvements on the actual building would be a county responsibility. So I'm going to take the word excited. I'm excited about this MOU because one of the things about work is if you have a clear direction of where you're going, it makes the job so much easier. And so this revised MOU is a really good is a really good example of how our partnership with the county is working well, because we're able to work through all the different nuances in governing and operating an emergency shelter. The Share Center, here's a picture of the Share Center. So as you know, the Share Center serves regionally. So that means that they take individuals that are not only City of Salinas residents, but all throughout Monterey County. It is intended for individuals and families experiencing homelessness. As I mentioned, we had a 2018 original MOU for a year-round emergency shelter. That is when the county and the city came together and said, we need to open up something beyond just the warming shelter. So that's when the 2018 MOU with the county was initiated. In 2020, the Share Center was officially opened and named the Share Center. And then in 2021, I think as we were starting to work through the logistics, we realized we need to define some of these roles more. So we did it during that MOU. As we keep going through these processes, we're learning more and more about how do we delegate, how do we communicate and coordinate. So again, this revised MOU clarifies the governance structure. It aligns best practices and interagency collaboration, and it supports improved service outcomes. One of the examples for improved service outcomes, we define the expectation of our partners in the MOU. So more of those outcomes, what are we hoping to achieve before we even find a vendor to operate that program. So the term of this MOU would be 5 years, starting 2025, this fiscal year, to 2029, with an option to also allow for two 5-year renewals. So that's if we determine there is no other changes that need to be made, we just want to continue it another 5 years to make it 10 years, another 5 years to make it 15 years. This resolution will give us the permission and allowance to renew it seamlessly. Let's see. So some of the breakdown of the MOU updates, as I mentioned, the county's responsibility is that they own and maintain the facility. So that includes those capital improvement projects. And they serve as the fiscal lead. So they are managing we're joint managing the funding, but there is a sole person who's overseeing making sure that we are spending the money as we said that we were. So they hold us accountable. City, we noticed you didn't spend the full amount that you said that you were going to spend this last year. Will you make sure that for example, this year, we spent more this fiscal year because the county spent more the previous year. So they're the ones making sure to help support and make sure that the funding is 50-50. The city's responsibility, like I mentioned, is we are responsible for the procurement of the operator every 3 years. So that will be through the internal city processes. And then we will lead the shelter operator selection process. The shared responsibilities is that the 50-50 cost sharing based on funding availability. It'll be based off of if we can secure the state, federal funding, general fund funding. So all of those will be considered. We will be monitoring the performance and tracking together. So we meet with the agency on a monthly basis. We review their activity and expense reports on a monthly basis. So we do all that together. Their operations, any issues that they're having, all of those communications are happening together. Joint fundraising and grant applications will also be together to support the Share Center, and the operator oversight and public communications. Public communications being one that we decided we really need to be aligned in making sure that we're communicating the same narrative for the project. Questions?
Thank you for the presentation, Ms. Lopez. We'll go ahead and bring it to the committee for any questions. No? Councilmember Teller, any questions?
I just want to confirm, I think I saw on staff's report in terms of requesting future funding to support the work that's being done at the Share Center, that the county would serve as the lead agency?
So the county is the lead agency for managing the oversight of the finances for the entire project.
Okay.
But they wouldn't necessarily be the lead agency for applications. I think that would be a determination amongst us both.
Okay, so the facility and possibly grant applications,
It could be.
depending on the RFP. Okay, all right, thank you for that clarification.
All right, I just had one question. When you spoke to about the shared costs and about how this revised MOU kind of helps clarify a little bit more on what are those shared costs, one of them that immediately came to mind when you gave an example of what is a capital project as opposed to ongoing operations and maintenance, the first one that came to mind was roofing,
Yes.
right? So for example, in the case of roofing and or plumbing or things like that, where would we trigger capital improvement project as opposed to ongoing operations and maintenance costs?
Yes. So capital improvement will be any structural changes or upgrades to the Share Center facility. So that includes the useful life, capacity, or value of the property. It's including but not limited to the roof replacement, major HVAC system upgrades, plumbing, electrical overhauls, structural renovations, and significant alterations requiring permits or capital expenditure approval.
Thank you for that clarification.
You're
That was my
welcome.
one question. And we'll go ahead and take it out to the public for any comment on this item. Is there any member of the public that wishes to comment on this item?
Again, Luis Chago Juarez for Building Healthy Communities. I think with this there happens to be, or continues to be, maybe on our end as far as community is concerned, seeing just how this is being facilitated between county and city. A lot of times that does contribute to some of the confusion of our residents, and just hoping that this can make it a lot more easier for our neighbors here. We know that it's the population of those are in attendance. How much of what they understand is happening in their own process, their own understanding of what it takes to keep the Share Center open. That feels like there is some education there that I could see, like some of your residents really being able to benefit, deepen the understanding of just how important this project is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll go ahead and take it out virtually for any virtual public comment. Let's try it again. Phone number ending in 4436. We are still unable to hear them in the chambers. All right, seeing as we continue to have technical difficulties, we'll go ahead and close public comment on this item. We'll bring it back to the committee for final action and comments. Can we please pull up the slide with the recommended motion? Or actually, I think it was just a question slide. Is there a motion on the floor for this item?
So moved.
Okay, motion to approve the MOU resolution by Councilmember Salazar, second by Councilmember Sandoval. Clerk, can you please call for the vote?
Councilmember Sandoval. Councilmember Salazar.
Yes.
Chair Barajas.
Aye. Motion passes. We will now move into our last consideration item for today, ID number 25-448, the Memorandum of Understanding between the County of Monterey, Coalition of Homeless Service Providers, and City of Salinas to support the Encampment Resolution Funding Round 5 application, Low Barrier Navigation Center development, and budget appropriation. And we once again have Ms. Keisha Lopez giving us the presentation.
Thank you. And to further demonstrate the collaboration between the city and the county, I am also doing a presentation on the Memorandum of Understanding with the County of Monterey and the Coalition of Homeless Service Providers for the Encampment Resolution 5 application that we anticipate to be released December of 2025. Sorry, I'm waiting for, thank you. So the requested motion is approval to City Council, or recommendation for City Council to approve the MOU between the county, the city, and the Coalition of Homeless Service Providers to apply for an encampment resolution grant application. So the city, the county, and the coalition meet on a pretty regular basis. I believe we're meeting once a week at this point to talk about system improvement, different strategies for addressing homelessness. And we began discussions about a year ago about another encampment resolution grant program that we would apply for. So the encampment resolution grant program is intended to strengthen the collaboration between state and local jurisdictions and the continuum of care to address homeless encampments. And so this is exactly what it is intended to do, which is that the city come together with the county and the coalition to come up with a solution. So the city of Salinas has applied for 2 previous rounds of encampment resolution grant. One of them was to resolve the Natividad Creek Park encampment, which was along the Safeway Natividad area, and then near it, we also applied for a Car Lake encampment. So both of those grants were approved, and we received funding to address the individuals' needs there in those encampments. So the first application was a $4.1 million application. The second application was around 8.1. And so what's different about this application process is that the county will actually serve as the lead applicant. So to Councilmember Salazar's question on whether they would be the main ones applying for the encampment resolution grant, yes, we have identified that the county would be the primary applicant and we would be the support. And so the county would be responsible for the grant administration, and the city would be responsible for some of the project components that I'll review in just a minute. So the key components of the proposal is that the city of Salinas has a property called the El Rey Motel that we acquired. The intention when we acquired that property was to develop it into either some sort of transitional or permanent housing solution. Because of the current zoning, what we can do is an emergency shelter or transitional low barrier navigation center. So the goal for this encampment resolution grant is to acquire funds to do the necessary rehabilitation and capital improvements that are necessary to even make this motel operational as it's necessary. So in addition to the components of the grant application, it will also provide the operational costs for an operator, a navigator, nonprofit agency to go in and provide the emergency shelter services that would be there once it is ready. And then we are also requesting for partial operations for the Salinas Outreach and Response Team. As you guys recall, I had mentioned there is a point where we approach a funding cliff, and the recommendation was to continue to pursue grant applications for sustainability of that project. And so part of this encampment resolution grant would support partial operations of the outreach team to support the encampments addressed in this grant application. The encampments that were identified as the goal mainly fall on county property, but they do have some intersect with city property. And so it's the Davis Street corridor. If you're familiar with AAA, the post office, it's in that area. And the surrounding schools, the freeways that are along that way. So that's all of those encampments in that area would be incorporated in here. So it's about 80 individuals that we have estimated to be served through this application. So the total city request is 2.3 million, and the total estimated project or grant application is 8 million. So I outlined the part that the city would benefit through this mutual application. So we would be requesting 1.1 million in capital improvements to improve the El Rey Motel and convert it into a low barrier navigation center. Repairs and damages, so once the county or the nonprofit utilize the site, we're asking for additional funding to make sure that if they were to damage it, that we have enough money to also fix anything that needs repairs there. And then as I mentioned, we are asking for 1 million for Salinas Outreach and Response Team, but it's actually broken up into 2 years. So 500,000 one fiscal year, 500,000 for the other fiscal year. Let me see if there was anything else. All right. The anticipated outcomes that will be incorporated in the proposal is to provide interim shelter and support services that will be through the development of the Low Barrier Navigation Center at El Rey. It will serve approximately 80 individuals currently residing within the Davis Street corridor encampments, and we will offer low barrier, non-punitive, and person-centered services and align with Housing First principles. The estimated application timeline, I will be very honest, HCD ERF has been pushing the date for when they will release this application. Initially, they told us October. Now they're telling us before the end of the year. So we're anticipating that it will be released by December 31st, and that we would submit an application as one of the primary. So I put January, but more than likely the application dates or last date to submit will more than likely be March. The award notifications are to be determined, unfortunately, because the state hasn't actually released it. We are requesting permission to apply now before, the winter sessions come, and then we're not able to get the approval necessary to apply within time. And that concludes my presentation. Is there any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Lopez, for the presentation. I'll bring it back to the committee for any questions. Councilmember Sandoval.
A couple of months ago, when we were talking about funding our homeless shelters and different projects, there was discussions about not continuing it. And if we seek additional funding and the council majority decides that they're not going to, how do we consolidate what's happening?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So one of the things that we have to determine when we're looking at all of our projects is sustainability. So the Navigation Center is a lease site. It's not a city-owned site. And so the El Rey is a city-owned site. So when we're looking at priorities, we have to really channel some of the funding towards programs the city is technically responsible for. Right now, El Rey hasn't been operational because of its current state, and so the city doesn't have any funding to rehab it. So if we have two competing needs. We have the navigation center that needs funding, and then we have the city property that needs funding and rehab. So if we're submitting an application, it would be difficult for us to request for funding for two shelters. And so when we were looking at priority, we needed to prioritize our city property first.
And how about the long-term sustainability? I mean, are we gonna run into the same issues, you know, for ongoing costs and?
Yes. So in the MOU, we discussed that there is going to be strategizing meetings between the county, the coalition, and the city to eventually transition this El Rey property to a nonprofit agency. So the goal long-term isn't that it stays within the city.
Yeah, I just remember, if I remember correctly, there was discussions whether or not the city should hold these real estate holdings, including some of our houses. So I'm just trying to understand, like, I'm in support of the project, just to let you know, but if the council decides that they want to sell some of their assets, we applied for this funding, like.
To be honest with you, we need to apply for this funding to even make it an asset worth selling. At the current state where it's at, we need the funding to rehab it. In its current state, we don't think that we would make what we need to really see the benefit of that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councilmember Salazar, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
All right. I did have just one question. I know we're applying for the encampment resolution grant. Is for encampment resolution activities themselves per se? And when I'm referring to that, I'm referring to actual encampment cleanup days, right? So like earlier today, I think there was a cleanup going down around the bridge that crosses North Main Street over here. There was some like a cleanup going on around the Caltrans property. Is that the type of activity that this covers, or does this cover ancillary activities like outreach that the SORT team does on a regular basis, or is that just SORT costs related to those days that we are doing cleanups?
Yes, so the encampment resolution grant can provide the funding for the services, not the cleanup aspect. So within the SORT budget, right, that incorporates the staffing, it incorporates our operational supplies, the safety kits that we give out to our unsheltered residents. So all of our program supplies would be incorporated in that. So this encampment resolution grant, when we're saying we're funding the SORT team, it's an extension of what we're currently doing. And so the SORT team goes out to the encampment and provides case management services on a daily basis. So it's just extending what we currently already do. I would say we're a trailblazer in the way that we serve our encampments with our outreach. We are one of the most responsive outreach teams to encampment cleanups. And we also support, you know, going out to encampments that are on the Union Pacific tracks and also Caltrans properties. So our team is the primary party who's responsible for doing the services at these encampments and helping them move into their, you know, respective locations, whether that be emergency shelter, family reunification, permanent housing. So it will be supporting the operations of our current program.
Okay. Something that struck out to me is kind of the difference between the Share Center, which is classified as an emergency shelter, and El Rey Motel, which is proposed to be a low barrier navigation center. What exactly are the differences? I think you mentioned something about the zoning of the properties themselves.
State and federal definitions and zoning. So in order for us to allow for the emergency shelter at the El Rey, we have to name it a certain thing in order to meet the zoning requirements of the city. That was my understanding. But they all operate honestly the same. They all have the housing first principles. They all operate with a person-centered motivational interviewing. So they all have those similar requirements.
Okay. And then would actual encampment resolution activities themselves be funded through our general fund? Is that the primary source for our funding, or does the county kind of foot that?
for the encampment cleanups of the actual. So because they're primarily on county jurisdiction, they would be coming from the county, not the city.
But when they are on within city
If
limits
it
and
is
kind
on a
of
city property, then it would be our Public Works Department, and it would be through the general funds.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. We'll now take it out for public comment on this item. Is there any member of the public that wishes to comment on this item?
Good afternoon again. We know how this issue is, impacts our whole community, and seeing just how hard, the teams are working, the city, the county, some of the local agencies. And I know this is not it's an ask, not an easy one, or not an easy one to complete, but it does feel as if there's an opportunity there to tap in the unhoused residents somehow, some way, if making sure that there is space for them in these conversations to whatever degree possible. It always feels like they're the last ones to comment, but yeah, obviously they're the loudest, or they can communicate, and that's going to that's going to demonstrate where they're at, right? So it's something to take into consideration, their voice, the voice of that community that needs this the most. Thank you.
All right, we'll now move on to online public comment. We'll try this again. All right, number 4, ending in 4436. Trying one more time, number ending in 4436.
It says that I'm unmuted on my end.
Yeah, we can hear
It
you
says
now.
I'm unmuted. You can hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Yeah, it says all those times it was telling me I was unmuted, but okay, so well, I had a lot of comments about all the other things, but since the technical difficulties turned over, I'll just talk about this idea of the El Rey Motel, which my fear is that, you just put $1 million+ for homelessness at the Chinatown until March. And now, and then, 37 Soledad burnt down, and they're giving very little funds for the Republic Cafe, the museum. Anyway, I don't want to talk about that, but my point is that there's going to be sort of like a lot of homeless between Chinatown and the El Rey, like going towards West Market. And that's going to attract things like RVs and other kinds of homeless things going on, which that's my neighborhood. And Monday, they had a stabbing in Chinatown. It's not the first stabbing they had. So I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about the quality of life and the quality of beautification in my neighborhood between Chinatown and the El Rey, and how those people are going to get their needs, go to the grocery.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for covering all the bases. Support the item. Move for approval.
Second.
All right, motion by Councilmember Sandoval, second by Councilmember Salazar. Clerk, can you please call for a vote?
Councilmember Salazar,
Yes.
Councilmember Sandoval,
Yes.
Chair Barajas.
Yes. Motion passes. And this is our last consideration item for today's agenda. Are there any administrative reports from staff? Taking that as a no, we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting at 5 o'clock.
Thank you.